Tell me you solved the garden problem between last night or Monday and
Not yet,
not yet.
Are you talking to
unfortunately.
Sean?
I was talking to Sean. I figured he'd be the miracle man to solve it.
Well,
Sean,
I
you're not
type
ready,
on-
buddy.
I have thought about going over there with a rake and some long pants, but you know how I feel about pants, Paul. I like to wear shorts.
I know that.
Yeah, I would not say that would be a good idea with shorts.
My job in the outdoor lab was the first thing when the leaves did come out, is to go 10 feet on either side of the trail and cut back the poison ivy there because kids always grab stuff, so that was my job to go back. I got pretty good at identifying it. I don't think I had any kid ever got poison ivy at all, but they may have, but at least they didn't tell me about it, so. But that was a job. It's always a job to get rid of poison ivy.
It's
Well,
nasty stuff.
we have a little tradition here of starting our workshops with non-arranged participation. So I'd like to see if there is any non-arranged participation tonight. If so, we're happy to take comments. Anybody have a hand up? Mr. Samafaro? Oh, we got to unmute you. Hold on a second.
The only thing I was going to ask about was I'm just interested in hearing about the roads, and I saw a crack ceiling was on there. I've heard varying things as a private person about how much crack sealing is done or it costs. So I'm just interested in that part of it and the road repairs and stuff. So
Okay, Justin and Dan, maybe you can cover that when we get to that.
Absolutely.
Any other non-arranged this evening? Okay.
Oh,
Justin,
sorry. I have something for non-arranged. You guys can't see my face, sorry. But tomorrow's senior night for soccer. I think it starts at 5:30 against Jackson if anyone wants to show up. 'Cause I know senior night season is like around right now. So
Gotcha. And that's over at the high school?
yeah, it's at the grass fields.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, Justin, I'll turn it over to you to lead us in our budget review, please.
Sure. So we'll just kind of go down the fund list. Pretty much everything in general fund you've already seen in one form or another. Really, the substantial differences are rather than presenting two budgets, one with and one without 3515, I just integrated the purchase of 3515 into the budget draft that you are seeing. There is a bullet point in here that indicates that proposed staffing changes are included in this budget draft. I was going back and forth about whether to show that or how to present that. So that actually is not included in this budget draft, but instead it's shown separately and kind of the impacts are shown between pages 18 and 20 of the PDF packet. And then kind of the last significant change to this current budget draft is the inclusion of a transfer out to the equipment fund, because there are some substantial purchases that are going to be coming out of the equipment fund over the next few years. And right now that fund is not taking in enough in the equipment rentals that it charges to the other funds to be able to keep up a timely replacement program. So the general fund is shown to be helping out with that a little bit. I know we have talked about general fund a little bit before. Does anybody have any questions about anything in general fund?
Hey, Justin, can you mute Michelle, please?
I sure can. Maybe. Oh, for some reason it's not. Oh, there we go.
Great. Jamie, question?
Yep, thanks. I had a question about the org charts on 18 and 19. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So the org chart, that goes down. Anything that's over on the left, voted by, appointed by, applies to anything that's immediately to the right of it and down until there's another notation on the left.
Correct.
And then, I mean, so something like the public services superintendent, or, I mean, I guess I don't know what I guess department heads, is that the name? Department head?
Mhm.
Generally, is it ever I mean, I'm sure the department head is involved in those hires. Right now, it's, indicated that they're appointed by the city manager. I guess I'm just curious to know how much involvement the departments have in those hires. And I don't know if it's even ever the case that a department hire is the one solely responsible for the hire, or typically in government, is it coming down from the manager, or how are we using to determine if it's the department head directly, or if it's just input then given to the manager?
Sure. So, for example, like when we hire someone for an open DPW position, typically it will be myself, Dan, and Kurt, who's our streets foreman, all involved in that evaluation process. So, like, I'll put together the job description in talking with Dan and Kurt. I'll develop that document and that advertisement, and then put it out to the public. But then once it comes time to evaluate the applications, usually like Dan, Kurt, and I will sit down and go through all of the applications and decide who we're looking to interview. And so we kind of work as a team to do the evaluations and ultimately make an offer.
Okay.
And that's true for water, wastewater, office positions. I would bring Marie in. And potentially Michelle. It kind of depends position to position, but usually it's going to be the people who are going to be working closest with that person who will get brought in and assist with the evaluation process.
Thank you. And then where it notes the 3.5 for a DPW worker or public utility operator, I'm guessing that means it's like 3.5 FTEs.
Yeah. So on page 19.
Yeah.
The idea is that it would likely be a public utility operator that would be the position, but that the number of FTEs would be split between water, sewer, and DPW.
Okay, so it's a single person. I was going to ask, is it a 6-month appointment, or is it somebody working part-time? Okay, so it's one person split between the two.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Those are my questions about that. Thank you.
Any other questions on the, any of the pages, really, the organizational charts or what's above it or below it?
Or any of the numbers related to any of the services.
Okay,
Anything that isn't included that you want to see included? If not, we can move on to streets. Oh, Jamie?
Yeah, I just had one more quick question, and this is something I might just do on my own accord, of minor importance to me or right now, but the city council pay comparison, I know some are indicated per meeting and some are indicated annually. My guess is that's just the way they're stipulated in each of those charters or whatever documentation we found for those municipalities. I know, for example, Celine has 24 meetings a year on paper. I think they functionally might have 23. So I might just, for my own reference, backfill what the per meeting is, because I think we can with reasonable confidence figure out how many meetings they have and what that is, just to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples if and when the time comes on that particular issue.
Yeah, and most of the communities will have their agendas posted on their website, so you can just kind of go down the line and count the agendas.
Right.
Is that something that the council wants to explore further?
I'm interested in it just for myself. So that's something I can do, but you feel compelled, you can do it too. Or if other people want it, I guess.
I don't need any more information, Justin.
No, I think intuitively it looks like we're all right where we are. So I don't need staff to spend time on it. But if Jamie, you find anything in your own looking into it that's interesting, I'd be curious.
Sure. I'm good, thanks.
All right. So up next is streets, which starts on page 29. So you had a draft of the streets fund summary included in the last work session packet. An updated version is included on page 40 and 41. But the idea is that we would do out of major streets. So it's separated into major, local, and municipal streets, with municipal streets being kind of a holding for the tax revenue that we get through the millage, which then pays out to major and local, depending on kind of the projects that are going on and the level of need. And then major and local each get their own Act 51 revenue. So in kind of the major streets fund, we're looking at a potential spring 2022 fiscal year 21-22 project that relates to 2nd Street. So doing the 2nd Street sidewalk and water main project that we've talked about. The water main portion would be covered under the water fund, but the sidewalks portion would be covered under major. Then in summer of 2022, so kind of we're looking at it as like a spring project and a later summer project. Summer 22 would potentially be the completion of the 3rd and Broad project that we were hoping to do this year, but we're not going to be able to get done this year. And so that hits in summer of 22. The full project cost is estimated to be about $670,000, but we would likely only see $300,000 in costs actually hit the budget, because $370,000 is offset by tip revenue, which is a grant that we can regularly apply for, and there's a set number of tip years, which is the Transportation Improvement Program, and we work with Watts on setting those projects, and typically we'll get one project within a 3-year scope, and so the 3rd and Broad project was our project for the current 3-year scope. But coming up this year, they're opening up projects for the next set of 3 years. And so I think that's kind of where the Streets Committee is going to come into play to help set kind of what our priorities are for the next few fiscal years going out. And then also in major streets, we have a sidewalk replacement project proposed for fiscal year 22-23 under the projected budget for $40,000. So that would just be a standard sidewalk replacement for those that are cracked or raised, going out and repairing those. In local streets fund, as you just approved at your last meeting, we're looking to do Dexter Crossing with the design taking place in the current fiscal year that we're in for $35,000, and then the rest of that project falling in fiscal year 21-22. Also in fiscal year 2021-22, we're looking at the CDBG ADA ramp project that we've talked a little bit about. And you'll likely see a recommendation for contractor selection at your next meeting. And then in fiscal year 22-23, the projected budget, in summer of 22, we're proposing a sidewalk and curb replacement project, which actually has a few different components. One being the spot treatment to kind of go along with what's proposed in major. So you have your major streets and your local streets. So the major fund would cover the sidewalk on those streets, and then the local kind of covers everything else. But then we're also proposing to correct the Edison Street paver bands. So we're we're having issues with that separation and cars going over and causing noise and issues. So we're looking to get that fixed. And then also working on failing curb in Huron Farms. So those are some of the major projects that we're looking at. We have also, to kind of Joe's question, we have implemented an annual crack seal program where our DPW goes out with a crack sealer or goes out with a crack sealer contractor and does spot treatment of areas that they notice where there is spidering or cracking in pavement. We also have an annual line striping program where the DPW goes out with a contractor that does line striping and basically kind of covers over those areas that have faded due to wear and tear of vehicles. Does anybody have any questions on the streets fund?
What?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I have a question. I actually have a neighbor who mentioned to me about how loud that paver band is at Edison and Main, and I didn't really think anything of it because I don't live close enough to one to know what it's supposed to sound like. Can you tell me like what's wrong with it and what would change, just so I could let them know?
I'm going to throw this one over to Dan.
Sure.
The paver band has broke off and has sunk. So there's approximately an inch gap between the asphalt. And when them trucks and the cars go over it, it thumps. So we need to take, I think it's half of it out and replace it with new concrete and attach it to the actual crosswalk itself is what we need to do. We've been looking at different options temporarily till we can get it fixed. And we're hoping to be able to do that here in the next month or two. Try to do something temporary for right now to make it a little smoother.
Thanks.
Jamie?
Yep. Can you just remind me about the 3rd Street between Central and Broad, or just that general update, how that came to be? And there's history that predates me, I think. So as regards to the timing, why that seems to be the next big thing.
Yeah, so 3rd and Broad is a truck route. And so we participate in WATS, which is the Washington Area Transportation Study. And kind of through them, we apply for what's known as Transportation Improvements Program, which is TIP, which is basically access to federal funding for projects that we're looking to do on our major roads.
Right.
And we have to apply in advance for a specific or a couple of specific projects. And then those monies get awarded in a specific year.
Okay.
So a number of years ago, we applied for the 3rd and Broad truck route because it's in pretty rough shape. And they said, this fiscal year is going to be, your year for that. We can still obligate that money and do it later, as long as we're kind of ready for it. But kind of what's holding us up is our communication with MDOT and the railroad. They're not turning things around as fast as they should be.
Right.
And so that's holding us up, pushing us later into the season. And so, if
Dexter Crossing.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the one where we did that. I'm sorry for forgetting. That's the one where we did like the agreement with the Waitses. They had some property over there and some right of way and all of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the big issues is that with the TIP program, we have to go through MDOT's bid letting process.
Mhm.
But they won't let us enter the bid letting process until everything, all of the ducks are in a row.
Right.
And so at this point, if we were to enter the bid letting process, like they only do it certain times during the year. So like I think they do it only like once every 2 months or something like that. at this point, by the time we bid let, awarded the project, and then actually got started on construction, we would be late into fall, or even winter before the project would be completed. So.
Thank you.
Justin, can you talk a little bit while you're on that project? Like the roundabout was a project prior to this one where we got funding through the TIP and we applied our funding towards the roundabout.
Mhm.
It was towards a portion of Baker Road and the roundabout, kind of the north leg coming out of that northern roundabout. Prior to that, we got funding for Central Street because that's on our major street list. Can you talk about, we don't actually receive the money, right? The 370. It doesn't physically get sent to us, because if it was a grant like that, for example, like on the Connecting Communities, right? Or one of those for the path. If we got the money, we'd be showing it as a line item for 370 on the revenue side, and the expense would be up at 670. But because we don't actually get the money, we pay the difference between what the grant covers and well, it's a percentage. It ends up being a percentage, but it applies the grant dollars, and we only track the 300,000 that's the balance of the 670 from the 370. That's why there's just an expense shown there and not the corresponding revenue that offsets the project. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, so like we received $613 in grant funds for the phase 2 trail project. But we only booked 300,000 of that because the other 313 is basically held and offsets the invoices that we receive. So basically they book the expense against the grant without actually sending it to us. So your explanation was 100%.
Does that make sense, Jamie and Juan? Just be your first time seeing some of this applied. I just want to explain why there's not a revenue item for 370 is all. So, okay.
Thank you.
But to your point about the roundabouts, we do typically apply our own funding, or a portion of our funding for any given year, towards that TIP project. Because typically those tend to be fairly expensive projects, and the full TIP amount doesn't cover the cost of that, the actual cost of that project. So we do end up having to put city dollars towards those projects as well.
So Justin, we've got 22,000 in this current fiscal year for crack sealing, and then next year another 22,000.
Yep. So
I think-
it's an annual project program that we've implemented.
Gotcha. And we've even, I think in past years, whatever, I can't remember the name of the bidder, but they've even offered to hold their unit prices. So a lot of times we just stick with the same company. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I believe they've agreed to hold their prices for this year as well.
So as long as the work is acceptable, that's been how we've been implementing that program. It saves the staff time of bidding it out again and putting the document on the street and going through the whole process.
And it's a lot easier transition every year going in with the same company because they know what we expect. They know we're counting, every pound they're putting in the machine. We watch everything they do to make sure that, the cracks are clear and it's before they apply the product. And it's been very successful. It might not look the best, but what it's doing to our roads from keeping that moisture from getting in there and then heaving it in the winter, it's been very successful.
I only talk a little bit about that because there's different ways that we procure our contractors on the street fund. On the projects that are through the TIP, everything's let through MDOT. There's a state component and a control to that money and the process. When we do the local project here that we just approved for Dexter Crossing, we don't have that same state involvement, if you will. It's our own dollars, our own streets, other than maybe a soil erosion permit or something that is required by Washtenaw County. It's all controlled internally between our funds and our dollars.
We wouldn't,
And so like OHM will help us develop a bid document for Dexter Crossing that will post to Mitten or BidNet, which is Michigan's kind of statewide contractor list. And then we will go through and evaluate the bids that we receive and look towards the lowest contractor who's qualified to do the work to make those awards, and then those awards will come to council for approval.
We would never be able to pull this off in this amount of time if we weren't handling it internally, correct?
Yeah, if we had to go through MDOT's bid letting process, I mean, that takes a significant amount of time. Does anybody have any more questions about streets? All right. So moving on to other funds, page 42. I believe I showed solid waste and the tree replacement fund at our last meeting. I don't believe there have been any significant changes to those since the last meeting. The one new one is the equipment replacement fund. And you can see kind of the list of pieces of equipment that is slated to go towards on page 44. Nope. Sorry, 46. And basically the equipment replacement fund, for all of the pieces of equipment that we purchase that are used by the DPW or water wastewater, actually no, sorry, for the DPW and solid waste, they track those engine hours, so the amount of time that those pieces of equipment get used, and then we bill those funds for the use of those pieces of equipment as a rental. And that's how this fund receives its revenue, or a bulk of its revenue. The cost of equipment is high, especially with the pieces that are purchased by this fund. So you see a lot of our bigger pieces like our dump trucks, our backhoe, our larger motorized vehicles are typically funded out of this fund. But because of how expensive those pieces of equipment are and how old some of them are getting, we thought it was appropriate to allow the general fund to help fund some of those replacements. And so for fiscal year 21-22, we're looking to replace basically a pickup truck, an RTV, and then provide a chipper box for our chipper truck, and then tubes and tires for our leaf machine. And then for fiscal year 22-23, we're looking at replacing a backhoe and then providing spare leaf machine parts for clutch and a fan. I did also provide kind of a summary of some of our equipment on page 48. And I've asked the DPW to go through this list and think about and do some research on how much they think each of these pieces of equipment might cost when it does come time for their replacement, and also kind of what the value is if we were to try and sell them or trade them in. So that way we have a good idea of kind of a schedule for some of these things, and that's kind of my goal, is to get the equipment replacement fund and these pieces of equipment on kind of a clear schedule going out a number of years, so that way we can start really planning on kind of where the spikes are with regard to replacing the bigger pieces of equipment. Does anybody have any questions?
Jamie?
Yep, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that line of thinking about the plan for equipment replacements. And I don't know if it's been twice now since the charter amendment passed that we've sold equipment, and instead of putting it to a vote, we've made a decision, or as a body, I guess the decision has been made to accept the trade-in as opposed to, try to actually hold a special election and sell it, which is what is, I think, required by the charter if we're going to sell it. So we can't put it up on the GovDeals website. So given that we have some things coming up, if not now, at a future meeting or as we're doing some future planning, I think it makes sense to have a broader conversation about whether we want to have a general approach to what to do with the sale of equipment in light of the charter amendment, or if that's something, if we don't want a general approach, do we want to just be taking it case by case? We will have a general election in November of 2022, that's correct?
Correct.
So that would be a time that we could place equipment on the ballot without having to pay a fee for a special election, correct?
Correct.
So one thought could be, if we want the city, city residents to understand what the full extent of the charter amendment is, we could at that time plan accordingly, potentially, to place some pieces of equipment as part of this equipment replacement fund onto the ballot at that point, again, without incurring that extra cost. That's one thought I had. I think it's worth some more discussion given we're doing sort of this long-term planning. So whether that happens now or at a future meeting, I would welcome that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. And just kind of a quick note, going back to the tree fund. Like we talked the first time when the tree fund was brought up, in the general fund related to trees, we're looking at implementing a rotating tree trimming program, which would take place in the winter. Basically, we would tackle a section of the city at one time and have our contractor go out and go down the streets and do trimming. The tree fund helps the general fund with revenue, but we have been limiting it to assisting with tree replacements, not necessarily the proposed tree trimming program. So that's why you only see $8,000 coming out of the tree fund, as opposed to I think it was 25,000 or something like that proposed in the general fund for tree maintenance.
Marie?
Yes, Justin, this is for your time, so you may or may not be aware, but those tree funds were set aside by UMRC when that was built, and a little bit in the industrial park, but the main bulk from UMRC, and they did put strings on it. It can only be used for replacement. It can't be used for maintenance. So.
Thank you, Marie.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions there? If not, we'll move on to sewer on page 49. So with the bond and the wastewater treatment plant project, the sewer fund so the sewer fund is running thin with revenues and expense. So last fiscal year, I believe we had to do a 10% increase on rates for the sewer fund. And this year and next year, we're proposing 7%. And it's looking like unless something changes as far as usage, we're looking at 7% for at least a couple of years. And this is kind of in comparison to the water fund, which is proposing 3%. So we had a $5.6 million wastewater treatment plant upgrade, which impacted, several areas of the plant, and the operations there. And actually, but part of that was in response to the Tyndall litigation that we just resolved for now. And it has actually put us in really good shape going forward. But that does come with some bond expense. And in order to kind of pay those bonds off and get the revenues to be greater than expenses, we are going to have to plan for larger increases. So kind of in addition to our normal sewer plant activities, which I can have Dan talk a little bit about if you'd like. We also have some different projects, and in fiscal year 21-22, we're proposing to purchase a hoist, which would allow for the removal and service of tertiary pumps for $5,000. Doing a clean out of the primary digester, a fix to our biogas boiler, which broke, what was it, 6 months ago, Dan?
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
And that biogas boiler, correct me if I'm wrong, uses methane as a heating source.
Instead of natural gas to heat the digesters and also to heat the wastewater treatment building. We can use that methane gas to do that.
Thank you.
Part of our renewable energy strategy.
Exactly. Which is a lot. I mean, we've got to heat that digester that holds approximately 130,000 gallons of sludge. We got to keep it at 92 degrees year round. Obviously during the summer months, it's a little bit easier to be able to control that, but during the winter months, it takes a lot of energy to keep that at 92 degrees so we can digest our sludge properly, which also goes hand in hand with less sludge that we got to land apply.
Thank you, Dan. We've also seen some recent issues out on Hudson Street, and so we're looking at potentially a sanitary sewer main repair in fiscal year 21-22. The purchase of a water softener, which we are currently renting down at the wastewater plant. So this would be the installation of a new system, which would allow us to not have to rent that anymore. A project to infrared scan our different electrical boxes at the water and wastewater plants. And basically what that's looking for is hot zones, which could indicate that there are electrical issues. So that way our staff can get those addressed before they become bigger problems. We also have biennial SCADA maintenance. The SCADA software is what we use to give alerts and notifications to our staff about different levels, different the status of different pieces of equipment. So like when Dan talks about the Westridge lift station, SCADA is involved in notifying our staff that there's an issue out there. We're also looking at replacing a samples refrigerator, which is currently broken or non-functioning, and then a control panel heater at the Westridge lift station to help with issues that we've had out there in the last year or so. In fiscal year 22-23, I had it broken out. So in both So starting with this fiscal year, we're also looking into a safety management program, which would be applicable to all of our water, wastewater, and DPW employees. And that safety program is split out between the different funds. It's a very comprehensive program, and they have a ton of different modules that our staff can use to do in-house training. And then in fiscal year 22-23, we're also looking at troubleshooting SCADA issues. We're looking at so actually all of those items that I just covered are divided between fiscal years 21 and 21-22 and 22-23.
Does anybody have any questions on anything that we budgeted for? And Justin, great job. I mean, that's a lot. So if I can answer any questions on the divot hoist, primary digester, if you'd like me to go through and do a little bit of explanation on why we need those, I'd be more than happy to provide that. Thank you.
What?
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions right now, but hearing all of this just reminds me that I would like to come over and have a tour of the wastewater treatment plant. So if that's something that we could possibly set up soon, I'm open to it, because
Okay.
that would really help me.
Right.
I'm that type of learner that if I see it, it's gonna stick more, and I'd really like to get a better handle on this.
Well, actually, I've been talking to Justin about that, and I talked to Jamie. Jamie came down and we talked about it. And I think I got a pretty good idea how to do that. Obviously, right now with everything going on, maybe we could get through the budgets and stuff like that. And I'd be more than happy to provide that anytime.
Just let me know when it makes sense from a
Yep.
timing standpoint, and I can make it happen.
Paul?
Water softener, how big is that water softener in gallons, I guess is how we,
I don't know that right offhand. I know that we've
a
helped.
local, a common,
It's just a common water softener. We use it for washing our dishware down here, the wastewater stuff. I mean, it's just it's a residential one. Right now we rent everything from Calgon. I think, and my staff think, that we can save a bunch of money by going to getting our own salt and trying to do it ourselves. So it's not going to take a year to pay back what this is going to cost us up front.
so is the softener including the salt? That
This is
costs a 3,000 plus the salt, or is it 3,000 including the salt?
This is $3,000. Right now, we're only currently softening one sink and one dishwasher, and we need to expand that because our lab practices are a lot bigger than they used to be. So they're going to put this in, and then they're going to plumb to the showers, to the bath, and then the other sink, and the other sink that we have in the lab. We have 2 sinks in the lab. Okay, besides the dishwasher. And it's not going to take a year and a half to pay that back. It does not include the salt. We would have to go get our own salt when we need it, instead of Calgon dropping it off. Or Culligan, I should say.
Most water softeners aren't $3,000. I've had to consider replacing mine here again, and you know, I've gotten bids from 900 up to 1,500, and that's 50 or 60 gallons.
Right.
Which is a big house. I realize I have a big house, but that would, I think, equate to some of the things you're doing there. I pick up my salt too, and
Paul, we've got to replumb this. This isn't connected to all the places. So if I'm going to buy, and I don't know if this is comparable or not, but if I want to buy a new softener for my house, I'm going to go downstairs and put it in. We've got plumbing that needs to go to different fixtures that it doesn't connect to right now. That softener right now goes to the dishwasher. So there's a little bit of plumbing that's going to be involved with that also. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but.
well, it probably does, but then it should say purchase and installation of water softener, not purchase of water softener. So the
Okay.
public know what it is, okay?
All right.
Exactly what-
I'm
And
sorry.
also, I would appreciate what you think the estimate of the difference in salt usage, because they're more modern now and they use less. And also how much you're comparing, one to the other there. Just trying to compare apples and apples, yeah, that's all I'm trying to do.
Well, when we did this, we got 3 bids. We just didn't go with one person either. And I could tell you the crib or enough, yeah, there were a lot more money. The other ones were for the same amount of work we wanted to do here.
All right. Thank you.
So let me jump into a little, I think bigger question or whatever that I think everybody can see on page 53 that, our most of our expenses in this fund are in our long-term debt payments. 800 and what is it, 862,000 or something like that in the recommended budget.
Mhm.
Goes down slightly in the next year, but it's roughly the same number. So Justin, I'm seeing on page 54 that Fund 590 is going to be, revenues are going to be short by 98,000. Is that correct?
As budgeted.
As budgeted, 98,000. So.
Correct.
So, and maybe I should call on Marie just to get the right number if you can. What's our reserves right now in our sewer fund? As of some point, the third quarter or whatever makes the most sense.
If you give me a minute, I can look it up.
Okay, I'll keep talking while you look that number up.
Okay.
So, obviously, our goal in any budgeting year would be to have the revenues exceed the expenses. Okay, what Justin is showing here is that in this current year, we're going to be short by 98,000. But if you look out to the future projected, looking further ahead, we're going to get right back to almost zero, assuming the water use stays the same and with 2 years of 7% increases in rates, right?
Correct.
So over the next 2 years, if you add the 98,400 and the 3,300, there's about $100,000 that we're going to drain our reserves in order to make up for the costs that we've got programmed. Now, again, this is a budget document. As Justin says, it's budgeted. So what are the things that could affect that? Obviously, if we try to do the capital improvements, like for example, the Hudson Street sewer line replacement, that's just above it on that same page, that's $20,000. If there's a way to get that done for 15, we're $5,000 to the good. Okay. To Paul's question with the $3,000 water softener, if there's a way to buy one and it's only $2,000, we're $1,000 to the good, cutting into that number. If people start to return to the schools and use a little more water, we will probably, and to some of the businesses, we probably will generate more revenue off of the sale of the asset. I mean, we are in business to sell water and treat water. Right? I mean, it's a funny way of thinking about it, but these are enterprise funds, so they're supposed to pay for themselves. The users are supposed to pay for the costs, right? So I just throw that out there and thinking about it. Our staff does a really good job typically of working within these budgets, and I just wanted everybody to understand kind of what we're planning to do here by, if we approve this as is, we're approving it with the use of reserves to compensate for the expenditures we're going to have to pay for this year. Marie, do you have that number yet? Or have you found it?
Yeah, 435,000 is what we have right at the end of third quarter in the
Okay.
sewer. But I'm on a different spreadsheet here and I'm just getting to where I need to be.
Well, while you're looking-
Our reserves right now, the goal is between 50 and 75% of operating expense. And at the end of the fiscal year that we're currently in, we're projected to be at about 12%.
Yeah, so let's put that in. So if the recommended by our financial analyst or whatever, if we're recommended to have a reserve balance say that again, that's 50 to 75%
Of operating expense.
of operating. Okay, and our operating expense, let's just spend some time going up above here. Our operating expense is the 757 that's shown on the top of page. Is that right? I'm asking, is that
On page what?
page 53?
Okay.
The operating, I'm seeing 750.
Yeah, I deviate slightly, Sean, from what,
Well, what
is
round numbers, what round number do you use for operating expense, Marie? I'm just trying to use round numbers.
both that and debt, so 1.5.
Okay, so you use both then. So it's operating plus
Yeah.
debt then.
Yeah, standard is to use just operating, but I'm like, well, we gotta pay our debt, so I factored in.
Okay, so in your mind then, the goal, if we have 1.5 million in expenses every year, your goal is to have reserves of about 750. And you just told us that we're at 430.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Okay, so somewhere in one of the previous two budget sessions, Justin told us, and we've been looking at as we look at the third quarter fund balances, do you remember there was a portion of last year's community stabilization money? And Maria, I'm gonna need
Yes.
you to help me with that amount, but there was a portion of,
300 and, I wanna say 300 and some odd thousand.
okay, so let's just, 312 is what I remember, but let's just say it's 300,000. We have set aside some of the community stabilization money.
Oh, sorry, 212, Sean.
212, not 312. Okay, 212. So staff recommended this at the end of last year when we received the community stabilization money, that because our sewer fund is short of our 50% goal, okay, again, we're at 435 versus 750. They recommended that we set that community stabilization money aside in case it's needed. Now, we're by no means poor, and we're by no means going into the negative with this. But I wanted to kind of tie together the budgeting and the strategy to set that aside in case something is needed going forward. So does everybody follow that? Does that help at all?
Sean,
And-
yeah, I follow that. Where would Jamie or Wah find that suggested in that number? As new
Well,
member,
The 212? Is that the number you're asking about?
yeah, or the recommendation from staff.
Well, I believe it was last year at this time or right around the budget time. I'd have to go back and look. I know that the number is in the quarterly reports that Marie has passed out for the last year. There's a line. I don't even know if Marie could share a screen, or Justin, if you could share it and show that. But there on the summary of
Yeah.
fund balances that she presents every quarter to us, there's a line item there that's listed there.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sean, I can't share it because I'm dialed in from my computer and I'm remoted into the office.
No
So,
problem.
But
I'm not-
it is on the very final sheet, very final page of the cash balances report. That's where it's located. And you'll see it in the general fund balance sheet information. And the assignment, it's assigned for sewer stabilization, which means that was done administratively, not via council. So the former city manager had that assigned at the end of last fiscal year.
Yep, and it was talked about, and mentioned.
Yeah.
It's right, and it's been in every packet for a long time, but yeah, this is great, Justin. Right there in the center, under general fund cash available for non-operating, the last one is excess stabilizations funds. Or at the bottom of the page, it's also listed there too. But there's 200, I just wanted council to be aware, that's when you're reading this every quarter, that's the 212. And the thought was, because we're short of our goal reserve amount, to set that aside. Now, we haven't just moved it into sewer. We haven't just moved it in and forgotten about it. We've kept it separate because the goal would be, as we monitor sewer from year to year, if water use returns to normal with all these rate increases, we should be generating additional revenue. The whole idea behind having additional users on the system, and we do have increased homes, the things like Grandview, the 150 Jeffords that have been constructed, some finished homes in other places. The whole idea is when you get more users on the system, they can help offset that and spend more revenue. If we were to take our budget out a couple more years, we might see that starts to return to more of a positive impact on our reserve funding?
It's modeled right now, 23-24 at 44%. And 24-25 at 70%.
So we're getting back there in a couple of years.
Mhm.
Zach made a comment, I think at the end of the meeting on Monday, I think it was something about dusting off the blower spec or whatever that, am I saying that right, Dan?
Yeah, another
Another blower,
Another
right.
blower at the wastewater plant.
So if you look on page 49, there were projects that we need to do in the next 5 years that are not included in the budgeting right now. Zach, I think, was suggesting that some of the American Recovery funds, I always forget the name of that thing, but the American Recovery Program or whatever, ARP or whatever it is. He was suggesting that if we need to do that, we use those funds, which are eligible for infrastructure costs, to cover some of these bigger picture items that are in front of us. So again, I'm trying to tie all this together. There's been a lot of information over the last however many months together. We need to figure out when we get that American Recovery Funds, how we want to spend it. Some of it has been suggested to go to the Second Street water main. I can't remember what that amount is, but maybe we'll talk about it a little bit here on the water fund. But we have about 460,000, right, Justin?
That's what they originally projected.
The original
Whether or not
projection.
that's the amount that we're actually going to receive is to be determined.
Gotcha. Okay. So I don't know if that's helpful. I'm trying to tie some of these things together that are in different places and that we see at different times. So if I confused everybody, I apologize. Jamie, does that make sense or why?
Yeah. Helpful.
Yeah.
Well,
these
and
are-
and
these are-
it
I
might
mean,
be
these
the
are-
case where, Second Street it doesn't cost as much as we receive in American Recovery Act funding. And if sewer expenses are an eligible expense, then yeah, that there's real possibility there that we could divide that up however we want.
So as we go forward, Marie's projecting that the sewer reserves are going to be, what are you projecting they're going to be at the end of this fiscal year? They're 435? No, not a percentage, the number.
Oh, I couldn't tell you by the end. Yeah, I guess I can.
12% would be about 180,000.
Yeah. I have it. 201, that doesn't look right.
All right, well, that's close. Yeah, that's close.
Yeah, I guess that is right. Yeah.
That's close. That's close. So our sewer fund revenue or our sewer fund reserves are going to decline from the end of the third quarter to the end of the fourth quarter, the end of the fiscal year. So at the start of the fiscal year, we're going to be only at about a couple 100,000, right? That's what you're telling me?
Yep.
And then over the next 2 years, we're projecting to draw off that even $100,000 more. So we're getting down to where it's getting close enough to be very concerned. I think we ought to keep that stabilization money reserved and set aside in case something is needed. That's where I'm trying to go with it. Something to think about. Jamie, thanks for waiting with your hand.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, this is a broader question. Just given that, there's a ton of nuance here, and there's a ton of nuance in a lot of what's coming at us in the form of the budget. It's just reminding me, so my understanding is like the school board they have committees of council members to handle different topics, like facilities or policy writing, things like that. I think Ann Arbor has something like an administration committee. Maybe they have their own policy committee. So it's different from our boards and commissions where we have citizens and like a ex officio. They have an internal to council, some committees. I don't know if that's something that's ever happened on our council in the past. I don't know what determines that, if it's just, what would be of value.
We do that now. We do that now, Jamie.
So what subcommittees do we have on council? So I guess we have the zoning ordinance. Well,
We have a streets subcommittee,
okay.
which is made up of a few council members that would work with, Dan and our engineer and our city manager to talk about streets. We have a utilities subcommittee
Okay.
that could discuss things like, water and sewer projects or replacement at projects at the treatment plant. We do have those internal committees.
Okay,
And my theory on committees is if this council is good on the overall direction and we agree on the direction, then you don't need to send it off to a committee to debate. Okay, so when you use the word nuance, I don't know, there's a lot of past discussions and decisions that I'm just trying to bring back up so that everybody understands the thinking from before as we lead in through this process. And all I'm trying to do is tie them all together so that as you look at things, you can think about it. Now, if you want to, if we want to, for example, where's the list on page 49 and 50? There's got to be 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 8 or 9 items there, right?
mhm,
If we want the utility committee to meet with Dan to prioritize those 9 bullets, instead of having them just be 9 bullets, right? So we know which ones we should do first. We could absolutely do that. We could send that question off to the utility committee, or we just send it to Dan and maybe he could prioritize it. But if there was something that we as a council felt we could have input in that we wanted to do, we have that ability within the structure that we're in.
right. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I'm coming at it from, so being as a new member of council, thinking like, this is a lot to get up to speed on. And thinking, I'm deferring to people on council and staff who have experience in this area. I'm thinking something like, for example, the, city manager search committee, how there were a lot of applications to review and we took 3 people and we felt comfortable that they were going to be the ones spending the time and, making a recommendation and moving things forward. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just saying because this is new to me, I'm wondering, is it the case where if we had a committee on something like this, or maybe we just defer to the experience, as somebody who's less experienced, I don't know if it would help me or not to know that, oh, there are 3 other people on council, 3 other council members who have intimate knowledge of what they're talking about here, because this is something they meet and discuss once a month. So I know that there are X number of people at this table who are very familiar with this and I can defer to them. That might be that we already have that at the table between staff and other people on council. I guess I was just coming at it from that perspective as somebody who's new. There's a lot to think about and digest. And so I wouldn't want it to be the case where there are 6 people on council who are having a hard time digesting it and are deferring to one person as opposed to knowing that there's at least half the council who is very familiar with this. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fine. And I think it makes sense fine, just perfectly. I mean, I remember Jamie also being on information overload the first time I looked at the water and sewer fund budget. I was on a rate study actually. And there's a lot of numbers here and you don't know where they all come from. You have to trust the staff. You have to trust the information that's being presented, but it's up to us to talk it through and to ask questions and to make sure it makes sense. And I think that yours and Waz, desire, if you haven't seen the wastewater treatment plant, Dan gives an excellent tour. I can tell you that.
Mhm.
You're going to understand where some of these things are. I don't understand where all of them are. And I like to think that I understand the wastewater treatment plant pretty well, but all I'm trying to say is tie things together. We hear a lot of pieces of information one time, or we hear them every quarter, or we hear it this way. I'm just doing the best I can during these workshops to communicate how I think they all fit together based upon past conversations that this council's had. I say this council, Dexter's council, and along with the staff. And now's our opportunity. If something doesn't sound right, by all means, raise your hand and challenge it. That's the idea. And hopefully through the conversation, we all understand why things are. It's like you asked a lot of questions about, water rates and stuff early on. And
Right.
this is why the sewer rate is so high, because we're behind.
Mhm.
We're behind a little bit, and we could make it up. Where I was going with the 98,000, if passing a budget with negative 98,000 bothers everybody, we could have a 14% increase this year. Okay, now I'm not saying I want to do that. I'm not saying that anybody on this council wants to do that. what I'm saying, what I'm trying to acknowledge is this is what the problem is, and this is how we've talked about trying to get back up to speed on it. And I guess I'm asking you, as you hear me talk about it, you hear Justin talk about it, you hear other council members talk about it. Does it make sense to you?
Right, yeah, yeah, all that context is helpful.
Okay.
Well, and the other thing that plays into it is tap fees too.
Right.
So we have tap fees for incoming businesses, incoming residents. So like if you were to build a house on a green field, you'd have to pay a tap fee in order to gain access to the water and sewer services. But as we as a city are becoming more and more built out, the likelihood that we are going to continue receiving tap fees decreases. We're kind of benefiting right now from like Grandview Commons, for example, as each home that comes online has an associated tap fee. But as those major significant developments kind of run out, the rates are going to eventually have to fully cover the maintenance of the full system.
Isn't that what happens? Isn't that what happens in Detroit and Garden City and Livonia? They have to pay so much now because they have no opportunity to build out. Detroit is economic, but the other two could do it, but there's no space. So they, the rates they paid 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30, excuse me, are not even close to what they pay now.
Yeah, it's I think, Paul, you're right. I think that part of what you are seeing in Dexter that is helping us as we go forward is the redevelopment of some of the properties. The Baker Road, Grandview, or at Baker Road and Grand property was an industrial property that had
Right.
served its purpose, and by redeveloping it, it adds users to the system and it adds tap fee revenue for each unit. The 3045 Broad property that we acquired, was set up with that idea that you would add new users that would pay new tap fees at some point in time. Now, if you don't want that development and you'd prefer to just pay it yourself in rates, then we have that opportunity. It's that the revenues on these enterprise funds have to pay for the costs, and unfortunately, we've still got several years worth of bond payments that are going to be on our books right now. So, I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And it's been that way for a little while, frankly. I mean, it's
The reality of the situation is you and the younger people in this community are gonna have to figure that out, because I'm not gonna be around to have to either pay or figure it out, okay?
well, I hope you're around a long time so you can help us pay for it, Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, the bonds are coming off in the 2030s, so it's not that long.
Yeah, you've got that listed there, right on that expense part of it. You can see the years they end.
Yeah, page 53.
Right, thank you.
So yeah, I mean, between 2030 and 2033, there's a significant number of bonds that come off the books.
Yeah, and it just becomes a question, at that time, as we're managing our assets, what's needed at that time? We just signed an agreement that pushed off figuring out the phosphorus issue for 25 years, I think it was.
2048.
So at some point in time, we're going to have to figure out how do we save for whatever the better technology is that helps us get below that number if we haven't used the legal system to help change it some other way.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to get too far in the weeds. I was just trying to tie in some things. When I looked at this, I was thinking, this is probably our one area of the budget that we really need to pay attention to a little bit, because I think we're all sensitive about, raising rates beyond what we want to do. And typically we try to raise them 2 to 3% just to keep up with the cost of inflation. There were years where we weren't doing that, like over 20 years ago. There are many years where we didn't raise rates when we probably should have.
Which is why we now have so much debt.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're trying to keep up with that and at the same time catch up, and it's not an easy challenge. So I just wanted to spend some time on that. Justin, I'll let you get back to.
Yeah, well, and to that point, that there's a number of communities that haven't done what we're doing. They go 20, 30 years without raising rates, and then all of a sudden have to have 50%, 100% rate increases. And then everybody asks, well, what happened? Well, didn't increase rates for a long time. So
They felt real good about that when it happened.
It seems like in the sewer and water fund, there's nothing is cheap. And everything that needs to be done is just millions of dollars. Is what it is.
And we don't, Marie, we don't have a chance to refund or refinance any of these, right? We're basically, they're all, we've done that if we had the opportunity to do it, right?
Right. Well, the SRF and the DWRF, those aren't refundable because of the way that they were done. Headworks, obviously, that's a long time. We might have an opportunity in the RD refunding, but I don't know. I would have to look that up. That's the one that we refunded. That was the rural development loan that was taken out in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we paid for assets through that didn't last the 40 years we're paying for the bonds.
Kind of like,
Not
kind of
good.
like the roads.
Okay, I didn't, should we move on to water? Because
Yeah.
situation, but similar utility.
So yeah, that starts on page 62. So, a lot of what we talked about as far as sewer also applies to water as far as, the users fund the system, and then also the tap fees. The water fund, though, is in quite a bit better shape than the sewer fund. And because of that, we're recommending only 3% increases for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23. In addition to the regular water activities of treating the water and assisting residents when we get calls. There are a set of projects which are listed on page 62. Including in fiscal year 21-22. Dan, do you want to talk about the fifth well?
The fifth well, we currently have a generator at. We have generators everywhere. We have them at the wastewater treatment plant, the lift stations. But with the fifth well, what we want to do is put redundancy on there. We have a generator that's there currently. We do the maintenance yearly. If we ever had a problem with that, what we'd like to do is put another transfer switch on and another plug outside on the building. I believe it was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, we had a problem with Ryan Drive well house that feeds the water down to the filter plant, the majority of the water for the city. And when that happened, we had a power outage at the same time. The generator didn't run. We paid almost $5,000 for somebody to bring just to do the wiring to hook everything up, to bring in the backup generator in. So what I'd like to do is get that taken care of now, and hopefully we never have a problem. But if we ever do have a problem in the future, we're just going to pay $1,000, $1,500 a month for this backup generator to come in, and it'll be here within 4 hours, and we're up and running if we need that water. So we have the redundancy at the Ryan Drive right now, and I'm looking to, and we have redundancy on our lift stations and different components because we have a backup generator down at the wastewater plant. But that backup generator that we can pull behind the trucks is not big enough to handle Ryan Drive well house or the fifth well. Any questions?
And the fifth well is at the high school, correct?
That's at the high school.
Thank you, Dan.
Can I jump in for just a second, Justin?
Yeah.
So on page, and I forgot you had this in here. going back to the sewer on page 61. And it actually was updated from the figure that I gave, the 12%. But where I was getting that percentage number, it starts on page 59. That's our rate study, and it's in there for water and sewer. And when I jumped into my computer at work, I forgot I had put this in the shared drive and I pulled it off my own drive. But anyway, there's one for sewer and there's one for water. That's where we're getting those percentages from. That's our model where we set the rates and are able to extrapolate things out. So now you can go back to water, but I just wanted to point that out. That's where I was getting that number the wrong number, but that's where I was getting it from, 16 instead of 12.
Well, and to that point, it is a model. It's not perfect, but it helps us with projecting out, and helping to set rates.
Yeah, I think you added some tap fees, Justin, in there that I didn't have. Because remember,
You did.
Michelle and I crossed, and that's the difference.
Yeah. So going back to water, we're also looking at a new line locator, which I believe helps with misdigs. Replacing a pump on well 3. And then since this draft of the budget went out, Dan and I talked a little bit, and I think our utility staff is interested in swapping the VFD drive replacement at the Ryan Drive well house with the rehabilitation of the iron pond. And Dan, I don't know if you want to talk about those projects a little bit.
The VFDs at Ryan Drive, currently it's a hard stop and start. So with the VFDs, it ramps up slowly and it ramps down slowly. What that means is we got well pump motors that are 200 feet underneath the ground, and they're slamming open, slamming shut, and it's not very good on the equipment. There's also a DTE savings on a soft start and a soft stop on them. So there's an energy savings, and there's some rebates we can get, when we do that project. The rehabilitation of the iron pond, we have a pond down by the DPW. When we backwash filters, that water currently goes down to the wastewater treatment plant. A number of years ago, we decided that that's where we wanted to go instead of, having the pond there. Well, what we somehow didn't get figured in with myself or OHM is it's an arsenic removal plant also. We have arsenic in our water. So that arsenic that we're sending down to the wastewater treatment plant now, instead of going to the pond, has just creeped up enough that it puts us in a different category when we haul our sludge away.
Huh.
It doesn't cost any more money. So what happened is when the calculation was done, it was done on 300,000 gallons of water a day is what we pumped. What happened is obviously we pump a lot more water in the summer with the water only meters. Okay. We're not in trouble with the level that we're at, but I don't want that to keep escalating. And we do have the pond down there, but the pond needs some work. The reason we went to discharging it down to the wastewater treatment plant is it was cheaper to do what we needed to do to get it to the wastewater plant. So that being said, we can still utilize the wastewater treatment plant, just not all the time. We utilize that pond, and we'll try to do it once a month until we can get the arsenic levels down to where they're acceptable with the state of Michigan for when we land apply sludge. Any questions on that if I didn't explain that clear enough? And Juan and Jamie, I will show you where all this stuff is so you have a better understanding. I promise.
All right, so then in fiscal year 22-23, we're also looking at a new check valve for the filter building and the replacement of filter media in filter number 1, which I believe we have already done one filter, if I'm not mistaken, 2. So there's one remaining at least.
And there's, yeah, yep. And everything's working fine down there, but we know that it's time. It's right at its recommended time to do the preventative maintenance on it.
So my question is, it says replace the VFD drives, plural, on Ryan Drive wells. We've done 2. Is this a cost of 1 more?
So the VFD drives is what Dan was talking about when he said that there was a hard start and stop on those well motors.
We don't have them currently. We want to put the VFDs on each one of the wells. I
Each
think
one of those.
that answers your question.
Yeah,
Yes.
the filter media is separate.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions on water?
Donna, you look thrilled.
Well, it's been a long day.
I
For
understand. I
somebody who
agree.
just sits around.
I
I
think Paul's got a question.
Go ahead, Paul. Sorry. Thank you, Tim.
Down in the project need performed in the next 5 years, it says paint the outside of the water tower at $150,000. As I remember, when the water tower went in the 80s, I think.
Yep.
That a decision was made by the council at that time that they did not want to brag about their city or toot their own horn or anything, so they decided not to put a name on it.
That's
Mhm.
correct.
And we were the only ones in the area, and still are the only unit of government that I know of in Washington County and in most counties, most cities, as you drive by on the freeway, every place that has their name on it. I would like to at least get an estimate what it would cost to have City of Dexter or just the word Dexter across there.
That cost includes that.
Or it does, okay. Well,
Didn't want to say that out loud, but you made me. Yes. So, I mean,
Good.
that's what
Oh,
we
boy,
did.
you got it going now, guys.
And
But
think
Paul, what's going to be free is
we
the
kind of figured on that happening. So, okay.
what's going to be free is the kids art competition that's going to determine what we put up there.
Okay. We might need
Yeah.
another 50 grand for that.
Yeah, we're not going to debate colors.
definitely with me since I'm colorblind. So.
That's not a council decision.
Well, thanks, Dan, for doing that.
Internal decision. Yeah.
Thanks for showing community pride and who else might made a decision. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good question, Paul. Jamie?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I was living in Ann Arbor at the time that they had an open art competition for the repainting of the water tower that's at County Farm Park.
I remember that.
So at least I know of 2 water towers in Ann Arbor. One's up over, I guess
Plymouth Road.
it's like on Plymouth, and they
Yep.
both are artwork decorated. I don't know. I mean, the water tower is highly visible to me. It's essentially in my backyard. I don't know how visible it is from other locations. Can you see it from Parker Road is maybe, but sometimes I don't know if I'm seeing the SIO one that's off of 94 or if I'm seeing,
You can see it from Parker Road, you can see it from Baker Road.
you can't see from Baker. Parker. Okay.
I've never noticed it. I haven't noticed it since it left Monument Park. Or not that, but the other park.
When we painted a bright pink, that's when you'll notice it.
Yeah.
Was that after some of my students dynamited it and blew it up?
Yeah. Me and Donna were talking about that a little while ago, I think. Yep.
Yep.
And
We lost a lot of water that day.
yeah. And also we had painting the inside and outside of the filter building and the generator room is another project that we're gonna have to do.
We did already paint the inside of the water tower just recently too.
And the Ryan Drive wells are taken care of, but I mean, it's a lot bigger project down at the filter building. And if we have it professionally done, it will last a lot longer than sending a couple summer help down there. A lot longer. I used to paint it, I know. Any question?
Justin, remind me again, are the two proposed employees built in here?
They are not.
They're not, okay.
Correct. But those budget impacts are shown on page 20 if they were to be put in.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to go look at, okay.
I kind of went back and forth on including them straight into the budget, but I thought it'd be good to show them pulled out first.
So on page 20 then, for the water fund, which is what, 591,
Correct.
you're saying that we'd add 15,000 in salary total?
Correct.
Under the assist for the assistant, under the assistant and the director. Superintendent, and the assistant superintendent, right? And then there's a
Yep.
there's a negative 29,300 shift when you go down to the next line.
Yep. So that would incorporate. So the top, the changes to allocation of public services superintendent and allocation of assistant public services superintendent would be basically the addition of the assistant, and so that those are the non-union pieces. The second batch is the union pieces. And so in 591, you're really looking at a decrease of 15,800 in
by hiring those two.
Correct. So with the assistant public services superintendent, the idea is that I mean it would be a position directly under the public services superintendent, and so it would be spread out between all of the funds more. And if it were, like the note is here, if it was an internal hire, the person that we would bring on would likely be cheaper than the current person in that position is.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna, okay.
So you basically have an incremental increase to that employee, but then it gets spread out between all of the different funds. And then you bring someone else on board to kind of fill that role, but they're less expensive.
So it looks like the general fund's gonna take on some cost
Correct.
now, which it probably can afford because we had revenue over expenses that were higher there. And our series of street funds, the 202s, the 203s,
Would also take on.
would also take on a good chunk of cost. Okay, fair enough. Thanks for reviewing that.
Sure. And I want to thank Marie for helping put that together.
Am I missing a hand? Sorry, I was staring at my other screen.
No, I was waving when Justin gave me a compliment.
Gotcha. Any questions on water? Okay, so how comfortable is everybody with the 3 and the 7? Paul?
Okay. It's gotta be done.
And there's also no proposed change for solid waste cost either.
Still at 25.
Still at 25.
Okay,
For fiscal year 21-22. for fiscal year 22-23, it's proposed increase of 50 cents
Right, saw that.
per,
Thank you.
per month.
Okay. Are we done talking about the budget review for now?
I don't have anything more for you.
Well, good job. There's a lot of work there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3 on our agenda is discussion of city council vacancy. This was added on Monday.
Before we get to that, can you just review next steps as far as the budget goes and timing and what happens after? Because my understanding is this was our last work session on the budget, or?
Sure. So let's talk about that a little bit. So at the first meeting in June, we typically adopt the millage rate that has been the basis for the general fund and street fund budgets. Right?
Yep.
And Marie needs us to do that at that first meeting so that she can get the tax bills out on time by July 1 that need to go out. So we typically adopt the millage rate at the first meeting in June. And then officially the budget at the second meeting. I might be missing something. There's a public hearing in there, Justin.
Yeah, at your last meeting, you approved setting 2 public hearings for the first meeting in June.
Right.
One for the millage rates and one for the water and sewer rates.
So there's no activity, Jamie, planned at the next May 24th council meeting related to the budget. If we need to have another workshop or we want to have another workshop to talk through anything, we certainly have time to schedule that. The goal is this is typically we end it around this time, and then if questions come in, you can ask them at the meeting on the 24th, or you can ask them independently of Justin or any, throughout the month of May. But that's how the budget process plays out in June.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Okay. And if we need to come back to something, just that you think of, this is a workshop, so it's completely fluid. Discussion of city council vacancy, item number 3. And I'm hoping that you're not looking at me with this one, because I was really good in a spot at 6 o'clock until 6:02 on Monday. So Jamie, I see your hands up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, given I'm happy to start the conversation, given I'm the one who sent the email on Monday morning. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this a little bit more in a work session. From my perspective, I think there are sort of 2 broader conversations that may or may not happen at this meeting or at future meetings. One I see is a conversation about more generally the process we would like to use for filling council member vacancies. Given that we have not yet adopted the final set of rules, it seems like there is the possibility of making that change in the future. And I think that's something that we should consider likely after we add somebody to council, given that's going to happen, my guess is in short order. I think it would make sense to do that once that person is on board. Personally, I would like to see something that's more like the city of Detroit, where there's interviews done by all of city council and ranked choice voting and detail, we could figure details out in the future. That being said, we are where we are at in the current process. And so I did a little bit of, a lot of thinking and, some research about that. I did take a look at the MCL, I don't even know what that stands for, state law, compilation of state laws, in respect to the timing. So our charter indicates that we need to fill this within 60 days. My understanding is from the effective date of the resignation, which is March 31st. And MCL states that whenever there is a vacancy, that it shall be filled in the manner provided by the law or charter. So my read and interpretation of that is law requires us to fill that according to our charter, and our charter states within 60 days. My calculation from March 31st gets us to Sunday, May 30th. And additionally, I found some legal proceedings, I think from the 80s, there was a lawsuit filed by citizens against the Livonia City Council regarding their method for filling a vacancy in the office of mayor. And it's not the same situation as is here, but it did make me wonder if we would open ourselves up to the potential for litigation if we did not continue with the process as currently defined. So it's not defined in the charter, but it's, as we discussed, there's the seeming direction, at least, of the charter to perhaps our council rules document in which we outlined this other process. And so based on those two things, my read is that the law requires that we do need to have this wrapped up by May 30th. And there might be the case that if we did not follow our rules, even though our rules are not our charter, if they're deferred to by our charter, I wonder about the possibility of litigation. I don't know how likely that would be, but if it's a possibility, I wouldn't want to open ourselves up to that. So in short, I would be in favor of moving forward with the, given where we are in the process, moving forward, ideally, again, the thing that first gave me pause is that there was not an opportunity for non-arranged public participation before the appointing happened. I would like to see that at least before that. I would be happy to hear from the public, although I suppose anybody who's interested in this has likely been paying attention and has had the opportunity to weigh in. I still would like to see that room for that and the agenda to happen before that. And I would still like to recognize the fact that, we do have a process outlined. That process does not require a unanimous vote. So there is still the possibility that, council votes and whoever is nominated needs to receive 4 votes. So at least in that sense, there is room for council input. So, and again, once this would be resolved, however, I'm happy to hear what other people think. I do think in short order, it makes sense to revisit council rules and decide if we want to make a change to the process longer term, if we want to remove that section from council rules and put it somewhere else in a document that doesn't also have things like our meetings start at 7 and people can only talk twice. That seems more like recommendations or norms, and maybe formalizing the process or separating that out from the document, I think makes sense. So those are all my thoughts for now. I'm happy to hear what other people think or answer any other questions.
You make sense. To me, that makes sense to me.
What?
Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. And I just want to add that I've been struggling with the idea that we've talked so much about transparency and things related to that, and then Jamie, this isn't necessarily, directed at your timing of, especially given what you just said, like not directed at the timing of your survey, but I just feel like we get this far down the road, and as a citizen, how are citizens supposed to trust us and respect us if we don't raise our hand and say, I disagree with this until after the person has put up? If I put myself in the citizen's shoes, there's no way I can't look at that and say, that doesn't feel right to me. And I just think I just hate for us to talk about being transparent and being, good government and then have that glaring thing staring me in the face. I can't, so it just doesn't sit well with me.
All done, Juan?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know a couple of things. I know that when council is nervous about something, or as Zach said, I think at the end there, how, knots in the stomach, I forget how he put it. He's always better with words than I am. He's got a little bit different lingo than I use, but I think it always makes sense to pause and think about it. And I'm glad that we were able to do that together. I felt good after Monday's meeting that we all got to say something, and wasn't quite sure what might happen tonight in terms of ideas or whatever. I guess I want to keep an open mind towards those ideas if that's going to be a future discussion. I think that's important for all of us. You know, the thing that I am trying to do is, and sometimes I forget that maybe if somebody wants to challenge something different, you know, we make decisions, we have conversations. You know, 4 of us on council approved those council rules. And I can tell you that there was no debate of that rule the last time around. There hasn't been debate of it in a while. Now, it might be that people have talked about it outside of council or whatever, but there certainly hasn't been debate about it or discussion about changing it in our, I can't remember how long. Okay, now that doesn't mean that it can't change, right? That's why the council rules are set up the way they are, and all those different dates are kept at the top of it. Every time that's adopted, you know, there's probably some subtle change. You know, Jamie, you pointed out the meeting times. I mean, we most certainly should correct that we're meeting at 6 o'clock as long as there's a Zoom environment, right? You know, now it's not like anybody is just logging on at 7 and saying, hey, I've missed your meeting. We're advertising, we're advertising the same way. I mean, it's pretty common knowledge that it's changed to 6, but you know, those have to be kept up with, I guess, in certain situations. So, you know, I just ask for your support and your trust in me when I'm asked to do something. And Jamie, you're everything you said there starting off, the only thing that was a little bit shaky for me as I hear you say it is I'm not sure if you believe that the rules are an extension of the charter or not. And you know that you can't write everything in the charter. It's impossible. And I can tell you from my attendance at some of the Charter Commission meetings that they debated, do they try to put something in the charter or do they leave it flexible for council to decide the process? And governance is about time and in a lot of ways about consistency but about some flexibility. You have to have the ability to adjust over time. And you know, we had a policy in place that you know, goes back to 2004, and you know, maybe it's time. Maybe we should have a different policy. Okay, I don't know if the city of Detroit's is the example or another one, or even some of the ideas that have been thrown out. I'm like I said, I'm happy to be open-minded about it. We have a lot of topics out there that I think it's important for us to try to close up and not drag as anchors along. I'm looking forward to the conflict of interest one coming back. You know, that's been far too long. We need to get something in place and give it a try. If it's not working, council can change it or we can change it, but we need to get something in place that I think that's just an example, for example, something that's an open item, right? It's been an open item for a long time. But back to the council vacancy. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, it doesn't say anywhere in the rules that my nomination should be based upon what I think is most qualified. But I can tell you the history of all the recommendations for people on any board, commission, or opening otherwise has always been based upon that criteria, looking for the person that you thought was the most qualified for the spot. Now, sometimes I will admit that there have been opportunities to fill positions on boards and commissions, and you only have one applicant. And sometimes you have to trust that that person might, you know, gain some knowledge and go with that applicant. But when we have more than one, And in each of the last 2 opportunities to utilize rule number 17 for filling the vacancy, 2.5 years, we had 13 or 14. I can tell you that was a lot of work. I didn't know most of the people on that list. And it was good work. I mean, it's always fun to talk to people and hear new ideas and get their perception on things. And, as I think about that, there certainly would be value for all of you to be able to meet those people too. Okay, I don't deny that at all. I think that that's fine. Now, the process does not, the current process that we have, and this is all just food for thought, but the current process we have does not say that you can't contact the applicants. Okay, the whole point of, I forget what step it is, 4 or whatever it is, where the names are publicly disclosed and the applications are put out there. You have every right to contact those people if you want to have a conversation with them. Now, you have to want to do that. With all the meetings that we have, the timing of this vacancy was not the perfect time. Okay, I mean, with the budget workshops going on, with the evaluation of the city offices, with the evaluation of solidifying the city manager position, frankly, we needed Julie to stay. Okay, it was one extra thing, right, on our plate, right? And anyway, I just wanted to throw those things out there as food for thought. I don't know what the perfect model is. I don't necessarily think there is one. But I think that the one we have is pretty good and allows for interaction there. It does give the mayor or the presiding officer the nod on the nomination. I guess, maybe there's a process that takes that away. And if it's about, me not having the nomination, if that's what's important, or not necessarily me, but the position, maybe we should talk about that too, because there are some forms of government that are just 7 council members. They all have the same title, and then that council appoints a chair. In our case, we have a mayor. We voted as citizens to have a mayor and 6 council members, and sometimes the mayor gets some other things that are expected out of that $275 a meeting, that are intangibles to that $275 a meeting, if you will, that are responsibilities. And I'm trying to do the best I can to do all those. So I'll stop talking. I'm thrilled if everybody is supportive to get the 7th member in there. I respect your right to vote no, I guess. But I hope you're not voting no on the person if you decide to vote no, because I think that if you independently look at the 5 applicants that we have, the recommendation that I've made is for the most qualified person. And if that's a debate, I guess I'm open to talking about that at some point, or I'd like to talk to you individually about what your concerns might be about that. Because that's the basis on which I've gone forward with every recommendation over the last, since I was village president in 2008. So, and that's how we're choosing our city, try to choose our city manager too, as most qualified and experienced, and that kind of thing too. So it's all sort of in line. Jamie, I see you have your hand up. Thanks for bailing me out from talking.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Right, and again, none of this is to suggest my support or lack of support for the person who's been nominated at all. Generally speaking, in any situation, in terms of qualifications, my interpretation of how that relates to a city council position versus like a city manager position, I think differs a bit from how you've been describing it. So I think, eligibility for running for city council as being 18 years of age and maybe having lived here for a year, there are these minimum those I think are called the minimum qualifications. And so my read of your interpretation of qualifications is maybe past city board experience, things like that, maybe even that they've lived here longer, or what they do in their line of work, or just topical knowledge of things we might be dealing with on the city and on council. If we look at the results of the recent election, I feel like there's a potential contrast in terms of new people being elected in by the public who maybe on paper, if we had applied for being appointed, may have appeared to be less qualified, but we were elected in by the public for whatever reason. And so one benefit I think of having greater city council input on either who's interviewed, who's initially interviewed and then who's eventually doing a ranked choice voting, is that then each city council member can bring to the table their interpretation of what it means to be qualified for city council, whether it is years of experience on past, other boards and commissions, whether it's, their content knowledge in a particular area or something like that. And so I just feel like the greater involvement brings a greater perspective, and I hope would, still result in, what is perceived to be the best candidate for the council. So I would just say, I think I might disagree with you on what it means to be qualified for the position. I'm not saying I disagree with who's quote qualified, whether it's your definition or my definition for this current time. But that's just how I might think about it differently.
Yep, all good points, Jamie. I'm with you. And that's why I tried to get out in front of how I was going to do it. Again, some of this is the timing, right? I'm reacting to the fact that the timing of when we're having the conversation. So,
right.
Wah?
Thanks. Just to follow up a little bit on that, Jamie, I totally understand what you're saying about, the qualifications and how people can interpret them differently. And, there was the council vacancy when you guys who were there at the time appointed Scott, and I thought about applying at that point. I probably wouldn't have been, nominated. I didn't have the experience he had, but I could see a case for somebody thinking, oh, like this person, might be a good fit. But I just think we have to be careful about the difference between a political campaign and this process. When I worked at the state Senate, we had, and this is state law, and I mean, we don't have this here, but just this is what it makes me think of. There was the legislative silo and there was the political silo. And I got paychecks from two separate silos because it's two very different types of operations. And so I just don't think it's a perfect, well, I do agree with some of what you're saying. I think there is a difference between a campaign and an appointment for a vacancy. And I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I can't quite wrap my head around how to articulate it, but I hope what I said helped.
Paul, I see your hand waving.
Yeah, thanks. I wonder when we talk about candidates, unless I'm unfamiliar with most of people that have been on this council now or in the past, held any of that position before. So all of us at one time were inexperienced new people on a council. We struggle just like everybody else, like we are this year. Some of the other people on a budget, and how to understand it and what it means, this and that. Eventually, they come up to speed, and they can be good candidates, or they are good council people, or they could be not good ones. But the point is that I want to make is that somewhere along the line, if you just take the position that a person that has been there before seems to be the one that has the most experience, as opposed to somebody that may learn, there's a difference in that, in my opinion, of how that can be finessed and worked. And I just think that sometimes we cut short of certain people that have great qualifications, but they have no experience. And that seems to be one of the main qualifiers here that I see between the people that are person that's nominated and those that have not been. I may be wrong, but I don't really somebody has to explain it to me if I don't see it, or a couple of people will, because that's what I see as a difference. How do you ever get into that process of the political area without dipping your toe in and saying, you know what, this person has qualifications? Even though they don't have the experience qualifications, they have qualifications.
Well, Paul, let me just respond a little bit. Paul, I understand what you're saying. Okay, and you know, one of my goals ever since I got into the village president seat and as mayor was to give the opportunity for as many people to be involved on the different boards and committees that we have to get experience. Okay, now when I took over, there were a lot of people that wore a lot of hats. There were several people that sat on multiple committees that we have in our town. And as those appointments came to end, I asked them, which one do you want to be on? Because I'd like to get more people involved. And we have openings now where we can still get more people involved. There's a couple of candidates. One of them's on the phone here that I've talked to about getting involved. And that's how you get your experience and your understanding of it. One of the candidates who's not on the phone wasn't even aware that our Planning Commission and Parks Commission were made up of citizen representatives. I mean, there is a difference in knowledge, and knowledge does matter. I agree. I'm all for giving opportunity, and that's why those other citizen committees are out there for people to get involved and learn about things that way, I think.
On what citizen committee were you on before you ran for mayor?
Well, that was the other point I was going to make. I was on the rate study. I was on the citizen committee that evaluated the water and sewer rates. Paul was the only one I was on. And that was a committee that I guess council at that time appointed, and I volunteered. And as it turns out, I was the only one that volunteered. But I mean, I had to work my butt off in that election, the same one you did in 2004.
Yeah.
And that's back when only a couple hundred votes would get you elected. But it isn't a public, I mean, it isn't a political process. I don't think that's what it is. And it's different. Elections are different. I mean, but I like I said, I'm keeping my mind open to this for a future conversation. I appreciate all of these points. I don't want it to sound like I'm debating it, because I think that, you know, what I don't get about the idea of going back to a person that was a runner-up is, okay, if, you know, Zach made the comment that he asked back in 2018, the first runner-up, which I asked him, was that Jim Carson? So Jim declines. Okay, so then do you go to the second one? Okay, I mean, how far away from making it to village council or city council do you have to be to still have a leg up on somebody else that might have volunteered? You know, I don't think that automatic, just because you put your name in the hat for an election, automatically should qualify you. And what if you don't have any runners up? Then do we use this process, or which process do we use? I mean, there's things to think about here if we're going to go into depth of it. But my point is that I've heard the strongest point I've heard out of this is that people wanted, the city council wanted a chance to talk to the candidates. And I would say that still exists in our process if you had the initiative and wanted to do it. There was nothing that was precluding that. And if you had a question about whether you could ask the question to those people, you could have asked that question. So just something to think about. Wah, and then Donna.
Well, hold a minute. Maybe I wasn't finished, Sean. You did cut me off and you didn't interrupt.
I didn't mean to. I thought you were done, Paul. Go ahead. The floor is yours. Sorry.
Well, I wasn't done because you said, I don't want to interrupt, but you did. So I'll excuse you for that, okay? I just think that some of the points you make are very valid. No question about that. How far do you go down? Do you need a process where it's only one candidate or two? All those things can be discussed and move forward, okay? I understand that. I just think that there has to be a point also made that most of us here on this council never had one bit of experience on the council. And it is political. It's political in many other units of government, much more than it is here, as you well know. All right, whether it should be or not, it's another question, but that is a fact. If you don't believe that, just look to the city to the east of us here. All right, so I guess the point that I want to make is that I think we ought to look at other criteria than just experience, which I saw in the candidate that was nominated. But I don't know how much other factors could go into somebody that didn't have those, that could be just as good or qualified, and maybe a candidate for 20 years from now, maybe the mayor, for all I know. There have been those that have come up and done that, okay? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, Paul. Sorry if I cut you off. Wah?
Thanks. I think it's just like been able to formulate my thoughts a little bit better on what I was trying to say before. First of all, I want to say that in my mind, qualifications and experience are sort of the same thing. And so we look at qualifications and experience as well as the letter of intent that someone submits. Those are the materials we have to go off when we're operating under the current procedure. And so we are a legislative body at this point, right? We are not a political body. This is not a campaign. So when we're going through this process, it's more like a job hire, in my mind. That is the way it is set up, like under state law at the state level. I know this is local, but in my mind, I don't see why that shouldn't hold. I mean, I just, that's the way that I view this. And I don't know how others feel about that, but that's the way I view this. That's all I have to say.
Donna?
Yeah, I'd like to step back to what you had said about there's a difference between being mayor and a council person. I can't tell you how many times I've said when people have complained to me about whatever, and maybe they were smiling and maybe I was too, or maybe I was just kicking the dirt and saying, well, but if you want to be the mayor and you want to have the privileges that go with being the mayor or the duties, you need to run for mayor. And if you don't, you run for council. As far as people electing, if everything was the same, then we wouldn't be electing a mayor. We'd be electing 7 council people. Moving forward to a couple of things that Paul said. Paul, I don't know how anybody could feel that we cut them out of the process of getting to council or getting into election based on experience. It's easy to run for election. You just need a residency requirement. You need an age requirement. Not a whole lot of other things go with it. So that's not about qualification. Then the citizens decide who's qualified and who's not qualified, not a small body. However, we can't just up and have an election every time we need to fill a vacancy. It's rare, but it does happen, and here we are. So I don't really believe that we're basing all of this on talent or non-talent or qualification or non-qualification. I know I've been told by 2 people that there have been comments made about nobody wants Joe Semafaro because we don't know what he's going to do about the fire hall. And that made me just feel sick because this is not supposed to be a position. And that's the first time I heard that. Now, I hope that if we ever have to do this again, we have figured out in the new process, if we have a new process, how to avoid that, because that makes me feel really creepy. That's all I have to say.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify one thing?
Sure.
I just want to say that I misspoke. When I'm talking about state law, that is about legislative employees and not elected officials. So I don't know the clarification on that, but I just know that to me, if this is our process, I still feel the same way. You know, my feelings on it are still the same.
Jamie, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate all these thoughts. I definitely don't want to make this as broad of a conversation as what do we want the mayor to be doing? What do we want council members to be doing? I think on this particular issue, it's clear that our charter designates, charter specifies that council makes the appointment, but they don't say how. And that how has come from our council rules, which is a document put together by city council. And what I feel myself and what I'm hearing from other people is that it's more than just wanting to be able to speak to other candidates. It's because there's a difference between making a decision based on the one person who's appointed and having it some say in who actually might make it to the top of that list. And so given that there is a variety of perspectives on who might be best qualified, however that's defined, that's why I think there's an advantage to a potential model in which city council has greater involvement in fully interviewing candidates. Detroit, they make a decision on who to interview, and then they have ranked choice on, to whittle down the list. Because like we're hearing, some people feel strongly that the results of past elections should have something to do with that. I don't know how you would go about defining a decision tree, like we've talked about, that would fully capture all possible scenarios such that you could actually implement that policy consistently, which to me, not implies, which to me, it makes sense to me then that everybody is going to bring their own decision tree anytime there would be the possibility of a vacancy. And I would like individual council members to be able to do that. I would not be looking to hold our body to defining what a specific decision tree would be, that we're specifically indicating it's the person who has the most years of experience or who's been on the most number of boards and commissions. Because, and again, the other thing, so this is a process we follow for boards, appointments to boards and commissions. And those always come through on the consent agenda. And that always kind of struck me like, oh, that's interesting. Like, we don't really ever talk about this, which I guess we could move it off the consent agenda. But maybe that's, I'm like, okay, well, these are boards and commissions are not decision-making bodies. Ultimately, they make recommendations to council. Right, there's not enough time in the day. So at some point, you do need to be delegating things to other people on council, whether it's the mayor or subcommittees. To me, I feel like the city council position is a little different. It's more than the appointments to boards and commissions. And it seems to me there's room for greater council involvement, more than just speaking to other people, because again, that wouldn't do anything to determine who is the one person who's up for the appointment at the end of the day. But if you allow for the voting along the way, then people can use their own decision trees and however they want that to be, and bring that to the table. So to me, what I'm hearing is that people have a variety of ways that they're looking at this and thinking about it. And if I were not on council and I were a citizen, I probably can't have an unbiased opinion about what I would think now that I have been on council. It seems to me I would rather the entire council be more involved in a decision on a council vacancy, but easy for me to say now, right? So I guess those are just more thoughts.
Well, let's work towards that. Those aren't awful words. They're good. That's fine. Let's work towards that. I'm willing to work towards that.
Right. Yeah. And we can't make decisions at this meeting, but I'm saying I think it's worth that conversation.
I think we're all acknowledging that it's a very difficult thing to do, and
Yeah.
probably none of the processes are perfect. But let's work towards something, and we have to be comfortable with the one. If we're going to change it, if we're going to vote to change it, we have to be comfortable with it, right?
Right.
And there has to be at least 4 people out of the 6 if we're going to change it, or 4 out of 7. You get a better chance of getting 4 when you got 7 than when you have 6. Let me say it that way.
Right.
Okay. And to change it, we need 4. So.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that the timing is now, because that's right. Currently it's in our rules, and the rules are supposed to be revisited anytime you add somebody new. And I guess for the reasons I said initially, I don't think I have a strong compulsion to try to make any changes now for the reasons I mentioned earlier. The time seems to be delineated by law, and I question our liability, if I can use that word, if we deviate from the process, which may or may not be the case. Maybe that's something the city manager has more thoughts on. I don't know that we need to engage our city attorney. But anyways, yeah, so that's why I feel like it's kind of two conversations. What are we doing now and what are we doing beyond?
Yeah, and so the worst situation would be that we don't approve anybody,
Right.
right? I mean, if it's political, as Paul's suggesting, and you allow the political to play out in the current process, you could have 5 nominations and no 7th council member.
A 3-3 doesn't pass, is that correct?
A 3-3 does not pass ever.
Right.
And that's why all of this comes to a head, right? That's why there has to be something other than political, I think, involved in the selection, because we're, as I said last time, we're stronger with 7 than we are with 6.
Mhm.
So, if we do decide to have another workshop, and I honestly need to wrap up pretty soon because I have a early morning work engagement that I still need to do something for. So if you guys need to keep talking, you're gonna have to do it without me. I'm gonna need to turn the gavel over to Paul. But if we do want another workshop related to the budget, if you have that inclination, send me a note, would you please, or somebody speak up so that we can get it scheduled, because we're running into May and pretty soon it'll be Memorial Day weekend, and sometimes people go out of town, or I don't know what they do, but
You're speaking about another budget session?
yeah, I don't know if we need one or we
Okay,
don't, but if
I
you
gotcha,
think,
I gotcha.
if you think we do,
I don't.
okay, everybody, okay.
At
I
least at
don't
this
need,
time,
I don't need one either.
I mean, Zach didn't make any of them, so I'll
I think
reach
I
out
saw
to him.
Dan's hand said he wanted to be here again.
Oh, Dan wants another one?
Yeah, I think that's what I saw.
Three.
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 Dan, you
Okay.
want 3?
Okay.
Well, and all these meetings are being posted online for the public and for Zach. So
Yeah, I know he follows the numbers. He does pretty well with that stuff, so. Are we almost ready to adjourn, or has anybody got any other thoughts on anything?
do you have thoughts? I mean, again, we're not making decisions, or is your sense that you would rebring the nomination on the 24th, or do we need to have another conversation on the 24th and make a decision then, or what do you have thoughts about what the next steps would be on this?
Well, Jamie, my goal was to try to get a process done within 60 days. And the reason I tried to jumpstart it as soon as Julie spoke up is because I know how long it takes to do the process. Okay, having gone through it before. When we delayed, to allow the newsletter to get out, we extended it a little bit. Now, I think there was merit in that. There's nothing wrong with advertising the vacancy in the newsletter. That made sense to me, and the timing worked out, so we could do it this time. But I also go back to, I don't know what the penalty is, if we don't do it within 60 days. Okay, it just means the penalty is really on us. We don't have the 7th person that we really should have as a governing body. So I'm willing to bring it back. I didn't hear from Zach. Zach was one of the ones that was most, I think, opposed to the process and maybe even the nomination. But he hasn't participated today. So I don't know how he feels. I'll probably put it on there. But I'm certainly willing to put it after a non-arranged participation if that's, if that helps. Of course, there's been now 2 meetings where the names have all been in the packet, and there was this meeting also, and I'm not sure how many comments we've actually heard about the process. We didn't hear any tonight about it.
Mhm.
So
You mean from the
yeah,
public?
I'll probably bring it back, Jamie. I think I should put it, I'd like to get it done within the charter rules if we can. Okay, that was my initial goal. And when we talked on Monday, I thought, well, we've got another meeting, so let's call the pause and let's have this initial conversation. I think that makes sense.
Right.
So yeah, I think you'll see it on the 24th.
And let me ask you a question, Sean. Did you expect Zach to call you back and told you why he wasn't going to be here this evening? Or did you know that he was in a work schedule?
I haven't heard a reason why he couldn't make the meetings. He has not communicated with me that Wednesdays or any other, but I mean, these meetings have been in my, or the tentative dates have been out there for weeks, and I haven't heard that he had a conflict on all of them.
I agree with you. Thank you. Just
No.
asking.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're stronger with them. I'd rather have 6 here than 5. You know, there's always good questions and stuff, so. Staff, thanks for your good work on the draft budget and I know you guys worked a lot of late hours and weekends on it. And I know that happens every year. It's a lot, there's a lot that goes into it. And there's a lot of detail that we don't see in the paper, but appreciate all your effort and thought about what needs to be done to care for the community. So everybody have a good evening, okay?
Can I ask Dan a question before we leave here?
Sure you can.
About the community garden? I have a meeting in the morning with the Rotarians, okay? And at this point in time, I'm telling them that I think it would be impossible from our perspective as Rotarians to put them in a position that we should be in that garden out there this year.
I have not had time to discuss that with Justin. Justin?
So with the community garden, there's a couple of options. So one is we can cut a couple of inches of dirt and replace it, which could potentially make it safe, but that isn't necessarily a guarantee. Another option is, based on emails that I've had with Paul Evanoff and discussions with David Mendel from PlantWise, if we can remove the roots and system of ivy that is there, if we can get that out of there somehow, that potentially makes it safe, because it isn't constantly leaching into the soil, but like if you cut it, it can spray. So if I don't know if there's like a giant plow that you can like drag a rake through and get all that stuff out.
I wish we would have had time to talk about this, Paul. I mean, the problem is that stuff's cut up in that garden. We went in there, we disked it up. There's no guarantee that you're not going to get the roots on you right now. And I don't know,
And
how long. Go ahead.
they're viable for a long time. That's poison is viable for a long time.
I know. And I wish we would have noticed it at the beginning, but there was no leaves on it. So
No, I
Yeah.
agree.
So you have to have the leaves in order for spray pesticide to
Yeah.
kill it, because it has to hit the leaf, get absorbed, and then go down into the roots. But that also can take a couple of years of spray to kill all of it off. So again, these are things that we have to talk through. Because I definitely think that we want
What time is your meeting tomorrow, Paul?
What's that?
What time's your meeting tomorrow?
7:30.
Oh, AM?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
We can't meet.
You'll
by
get
then.
up that
I'm here,
early?
Justin. I'm here. I mean, we just haven't had time with everything we've been.
I
talking
understand. No,
about.
don't worry about it.
And I'm sorry.
I just feel it's important that the members stay safe. And
Yes.
we have the alternative is not to do it this year. We found that with COVID, some people didn't get to visit their families and still haven't, okay?
Right.
And so we may not have a garden this year, okay? It's been an unfortunate situation, but it happened, and I'm not blaming anybody. In fact, nobody can be blamed because it was not known.
Right.
So we just need to move forward, and if that's the recommendation, they accept it, or they find an alternative for another garden somewhere else, we'll talk about that, but I cannot in good conscience recommend that we go out there this year. Okay. And, maybe
don't
for 2 years.
disagree with you. There needs to be some work done out there. And I think we've got the right people lined up. Me and Justin just need to have time to put the plan together, and then also talk to Olga. I mean, we got to get her involved too. I mean, it's so.
The cutting of the soil, excavating out, I would say you would do more than a couple inches, maybe 6 inches or 8 inches. I don't know how deep the disc was that plowed it, what that depth is. Maybe it's a foot, but there's
No.
merit in that, in my mind. I mean, I don't know what the cost would be to have somebody bring an excavator back and take it out and then bring in, a mixture of either leaves or topsoil or mulch or not mulch, but, something better, better soil. I don't know where, I don't know. who would do that.
You're talking just the garden portion, correct? Correct.
I'm
Sean?
talking, yeah, just the garden portion.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can I say-
just the,
Sorry.
go ahead, Wah. No, that's
No,
okay.
it's stupid. It's a stupid comment. It's useless. It's more of my heavy machinery desires. And the fact that I've never had poison ivy in my life and I grew up in the country. So put me on the excavator. I will take care of this.
I love it.
Okay.
There you go. What are you doing tomorrow at 7:30?
I'll get you a
I'm
hard
on the
helmet.
excavator.
I'll get you a hard helmet and put wine on it for you. You'll be good to go. Okay. I mean, if that's the direction we want to go, we can get some numbers. I mean,
I'd get a quote. That's probably the most expensive of any input, but it's also probably the most efficient and quick to rectify the situation. Because
well, you also got to be concerned with the raised gardens too, because the raised gardens that they want us to put out there, 5 of them are not inside the garden. So maybe we need to, if we're going to excavate something, maybe it needs to be all the way over to where the storage hut is, because people, from what I hear, that little building we put up, they store stuff in there too. So
I guess I didn't understand. Yeah, if it's a bigger area, then it's a bigger area, Dan. Sure.
Did we excavate that area though, where the raised beds are planned?
no, but it's all them roots are in there. That's where the whole problem started, is them going in and out of there and digging the water lines and doing all that. So them roots are everywhere. And then the roots, we had to move the dirt back. So we had that heavy piece of equipment going back and forth. So that's all tore up and got roots, juice, or whatever you want to call it, all over the place too. So anyway, I just want you to make sure, I mean, if I went out there with Olga, she wants the raised beds between the little shed and the garden. So that's an additional area that we'd have to be concerned with.
Sorry to delay the meeting anymore, but I feel I need that
Okay.
information tomorrow morning because there will be people out there as soon as that's done, to start planting. And some people have bought their plants already or grown their plants and seeds and all that. And I just want to give them as much time to come up with alternatives as they can.
Okay.
My son found a plot over at the Chelsea Community Garden that he's going to be used for some of our plants, tomato plants, but that's only a 10 by 10 space.
Well, the thing is, we still need water for everybody too,
Right.
so, I mean, if we look at another place, we gotta figure out how we're gonna get water to wherever that is, so, okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
We'll do our best.
Yep.
I know you were just, thank you.
All set?
And move we adjourn, if that's what it takes.
Sounds good. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Thanks.